Hey listeners, just a small trigger warning. In this episode, Caleb and I discuss depression and suicide. We keep it pretty light, but nevertheless, the topics do come up, and I just wanted you all to be aware so you could skip this episode if you needed to. Thank you.
You're listening in on an animated discussion about Batman the Animated Series with two experts in their fields. I'm Joshua Unruh, superhero scholar.
And I'm Caleb Masters, your friendly neighborhood film critic extraordinaire from thecinematropolis.com. And today's topic is Season 2, Episode 2, Perchance a Dream. Joshua, I have had so many dreams lately about my life as a superhero. What would that look like?
What would
that
look
so
like?
I'm fascinated to see Bruce Wayne's take on the opposite. I just want to be a normal dude. I'm like most of us these days, superheroes are so hot. We all want to like live that superhero dream of fighting crime and swashbuckling fun and stuff. And Bruce Wayne's like, nah, dog, I want to chill out.
You know, I'm actually, as we talk about this episode, going to push back on that being Bruce Wayne's perfect life, because I don't think that actually gets played out in this episode.
It doesn't fully realize itself in this episode.
And I think it's because being Batman is his perfect life.
Yes.
But we'll dig into that. We'll dig into that as we go.
Well, we'll circle back to it. I also have to say, neuroscience in Batman, I don't know why I hadn't considered like wanting to talk about this or think about this before, but this episode kind of opened me up to it. I was like, yeah, neuroscience manipulation of Batman. That's kind of a cool concept. Fits right in with the psychological, but in a more scientific way than more of the theoretical way.
I think one reason that it hadn't occurred to us necessarily is because the place that this intersects with Batman is most specifically is in the character of the Mad Hatter.
Yeah, so Mad Hatter. You know what, Joshua? Let's just go ahead and talk about the elephant in the room, which is the Mad Hatter. So this is not the first appearance of the Mad Hatter. He's actually not even in this episode that much. In fact, in this episode, he's really used as a means to an end.
Yeah, he's 100% as far as the writer's concerned. He is the vehicle through which they do the thing they wanted to do.
Exactly. And so let's go ahead and just tell listeners why we actually skipped the origin story for Mad Hatter, which was Mad as a Hatter back in Season 1.
Well, it was towards the end of Season 1.
Correct.
And as you, our loyal listeners, will recall, we said we were going to skip the ones that weren't really that great. It's not really that great. It's not a very good episode.
It feels pretty flat in comparison. At that point, we've seen so many really powerful origin stories. We get to that.
We've seen Mr. Freeze. We've seen Poison Ivy. And then we get this. And I mean, for me, part of the reason that it falls flat is because his villainous origin is basically that he is he's creepy, harassing creeper.
Yes.
I mean, look, they don't endorse it. Like, you know, we've talked about some parts of this series that aged very well and some parts that have not aged very well. That actually ages pretty well.
Well, because they
do not endorse his creepiness.
They judge him as a creep. You know what? This dude. I'm sure the Mad Hatter would be today what we would call a neckbeard or a gamer gator type, a guy who sits in his basement on the internet trying to figure out how he can like hit on girls or something. And then like when he tries to do it is incredibly creepy. And then when she isn't into him, gets really offended and then starts to like really holds a lot of resentment towards women in general. That's Mad Hatter.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
Probably the most interesting take I can have on that origin story is that if he was to come out as a brand new character today, he would be a gamer, probably.
I actually think that if they redid that episode today, it would be 50 times more interesting because that's probably the tactic that they would take.
Right.
As it was, again, he was kind of the means to an end. We need to introduce this guy. He's a classic Batman villain. He also, kind of like Mr. Freeze, did not have a very interesting or robust origin from the comics that they could draw on. They needed to include this weird fascination with Alice in Wonderland and also apparently mind control, which is fine. Like, that's the most interesting thing about it.
Man, okay. Maybe this is a whole other talk, but like now that we're talking about it and I'm thinking about it, I'm like, dude, this guy is totally a gamer gator.
Yeah.
He wants to like control women, and he's a guy who actually has the means and the technology to do so because he's like, I'm a nice guy, I'm a nerd, I'm socially awkward, you should accept me for who I am and then want to date me. And then like, because you know, like girls aren't into that generally, are going to be like, nah, that's cool. You're a sweet guy. Pat on the back. He holds resentment and then uses his technology to control them. I totally see that being a phenomenon that exists today, like that type of guy, right?
No, I think the conversation we're having about the episode is 10,000 times more interesting than the episode. It's why we skipped it.
Yeah, it's super lame. And the thing is, the coolest thing is the gimmick, the Alice in Wonderland theme.
Right.
He's got this, again, he's a guy he's a real smart, sweet kind of guy until you realize he's actually creepy because he's really into Alice, and you're like, oh, I feel bad for him, until, oh God, no, he's stalking her.
No, never mind. He's terrifying.
He is terrifying.
And I think if you want to look at the most interesting moment in that episode as far as his supervillain origin, it's that he controls everyone but Alice. He is controlling everybody to try and impress her.
Right.
When that fails, he flips the switch and just controls her also. And it's like, there was your last chance at being a good person, and you put it aside.
Well, because he really wanted her to actually like him.
Right.
And is
But this
terrifying.
is no way to run a railroad.
Oh, well, no. It's absolutely disgusting and terrifying that he would mind control other people to try and just get under my skin. But this conversation we're having is all the time we really wanted to give the Mad Hatter as a character.
It's not, we would not actually recommend you go back and watch that episode because it's not that good, but it does have, if we remade it now, there'd be some interesting meat on them.
Well, there's a lot of interesting things that character represents, like ideas that just don't play out very well in that origin story.
Now, this is kind of not surprising to me from the comic book perspective because he actually showed up in the comics in 1948, so reasonably early, right? But basically a hat-themed villain. Like at the time, Joker just robbed practical joke stores, and Penguin only stole bird stuff, and Catwoman stole cat stuff. They were gimmick people.
And then someone was reading lots of Lewis Carroll, and they're like, wait a second, this guy's kind of creepy.
We can do this weird-looking, creepy guy who's very hat-focused and then give it a Wonderland edge. The mind control aspect did not actually show up as part of the character until Batman 66. It showed up on TV before the comics.
Interesting.
And it wouldn't make it into the comics until 1981.
Wow, that's interesting because that is such a staple of who that character is now.
I think because of 66, right? 66 is the thing that makes Batman go from this relatively small sort of niche industry to this mass media phenomenon. And so a lot of the stuff and then BTAS comes along and does the same thing again, 30 years later. But that's the thing that blew up in our public consciousness about Batman, like collectively. And so that's the thing that stuck because that's all he is.
Right. Because even like if you look at the Arkham games, like that's what he does. He mind controls people, creates alternate realities, and tries to manipulate them. So I mean, like that's, and the cartoon, every time he's been used, at least as long as I've been alive, it's always mind control, manipulation, the gimmick.
It raises him to the level that Batman is operating at by that point, too. Instead of just a person who is fascinated by Lewis Carroll and wants to steal hats.
Right.
Like, what are we doing?
It's a strange gimmick.
Yeah. When you were in 1948, height of the post-war years by that point. But I mean, Batman and Superman comics especially were very, very silly during that time on purpose.
Right.
They were being read by servicemen. They wanted them to be very light and airy. So this idea of like, he only steals hat stuff and makes references. All of his henchmen are Tweedledum and Tweedledee. Makes a lot of sense at the time. But if you're going to keep him around, you got to do something else with him.
Right.
And I feel for the BTAS creators too. But I also feel like even though he's not in Perchance to Dream that much, we've already hit, this is the part of him that we actually care about.
Yeah, exactly. Well, they take the idea, again, this is a good use of, hey, the character himself might not be super interesting, at least the way we've executed it, but the thing he can do actually gives us an opportunity to tell a really fascinating Bruce Wayne story.
Exactly. And we've discussed this before with the episode that's basically Cool Hand Luke. And I mean, anytime we get to go into Bruce's mind, it's really interesting.
Right.
Meaty things happen.
Right. So before we get into the meat of the episode here, title card, Joshua.
C-.
I actually had to go back and rewatch the title card. I was like, what was the title card again? And honestly,
that is the true thing. The worst thing I can say about this title card is both of us had the same reaction. I had a space in my notes for title card.
Yep.
I got halfway through the episode and realized it was still blank.
Yep.
And I was watching, I'm paying attention, and halfway through I was like, I never even wrote anything down.
It's like clouds, super generic, and the music is like really cheery and kind of like that, but it actually doesn't fit the tone of the episode at all.
Okay, tell me what you think, but I believe what they were going for is it's very sort of cloudy and stormy the night that Batman and Bruce Wayne confront one another at the end of the episode. It's supposed to be a ray of hope into Bruce Wayne's life. I guess. And that's where the cheery music comes from too. It's not great.
I think someone looked over at whoever was composing the music for this episode and said, "Hey, we want something dreamy," and that's all they got.
You're probably not wrong. Only other apology I can make for it is they didn't want to give away what was going on. The title is pretty on the nose, though.
Right.
So I don't know. It's just different groups of people working on it and not agreeing on how much of a secret it should be or not be. How big a reveal should it be? So I don't know. It's not great.
Well, here's the thing:
fantastic.
I kind of wish they had been a little more coy about it, because again, while I think this is a brilliant episode, I actually want to go ahead and just jump right into the episode. Also, it's a kind of a nod to a really famous Twilight Zone episode. By the way, which I think is a nice nod. And this episode is...
Well, we've talked about Twilight Zone's effect on this show before, and we weren't sure that that's what they were doing, but the more it crops up, the more I'm like, nah, that's what they were doing.
Well, and I should also note that I know Kevin Conroy has also noted this is one of his very favorite episodes of everything he's ever done.
That makes sense. That makes sense for a couple of reasons.
He gets to explore the character.
Absolutely. And I don't want to jump too far ahead, but he gets to do a character he doesn't usually get to do in this episode. He does the voice for Thomas Wayne in this episode.
Oh my God, I didn't even realize that.
He's doing basically older Bruce.
Right.
Normally, up till now, when we have been confronted with Dream Thomas, like it's a hallucination or whatever, and he is very disapproving usually, it's
Right.
Richard Mole.
Right.
It's the voice of Two-Face and Harvey Dent, who just like knocks it down an octave and is all, Bruce, we are very disappointed in you. But in the happy
Why
one...
did you let us die, son?
Yeah, right. But in the happy one...
It's Bruce Wayne.
It's Bruce Wayne,
Older.
like roughed up
a little bit. I didn't even notice that. Nice touch. Very nice touch.
It's a strong...
from the Bruce Timm and writing team there.
Yeah, I mean, again, the way these things are put together, maybe it's just because Richard Mole wasn't available that day.
Right.
But at the same time, it doesn't matter. It makes a statement in this
Right.
episode whether they meant to do it or not.
Andrea Romano, actually, casting director. Good call from her point. Anyway, let's talk about this, though, because this is really a fantastic Bruce Wayne piece. Not necessarily even a Batman piece. I mean, I know they're one and the same, but we actually look at the Bruce Wayne
we're going to get into that.
Yeah, okay.
We're going to get into that.
Well, because, okay, this goes back, and we've actually talked about this several times.
Yeah.
In this universe, the real character is Batman. Bruce Wayne's the act. But this episode kind of like dives more into the Bruce Wayne side of the character. Like, in a reality where you're not Batman, who are you, and what is it you want as Bruce Wayne? Or do you really want
or
the
do
thing?
you want that, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Another way that I love this episode, before we get into the meaty parts, okay, just the way that it's put together. Notice that it opens. This is going to be a very deep, serious, psychological, not very action-heavy episode.
Oh,
but
yes.
They knew who their audience was.
Right.
And it starts with a car chase and a smash cut.
Oh,
Literally
no. Actually,
a smash cut.
Yeah. Good point. No, yeah. Perfect. And
Just
that's why
wanna
I
bring
kind
that
of think,
up.
I kind of
So
wish it was a
good.
little less on the nose in the title.
Yeah, because you have no idea.
Because otherwise you'd have no idea what's going on.
These are nameless henchmen that he's chasing. We don't. The name Mad Hatter never comes up until the big reveal.
Right.
It's just an in media res car chase that is going roughly.
Right.
Like Batman's a little off tonight or whatever. We don't know.
We know he's chasing someone, and all of a sudden, bam, he's knocked unconscious. Then he wakes up in bed, and it's like,
So good.
oh, perfect.
They know their audience. They also understand that Batman is an action hero, which doesn't mean you can't do psychological questions, but it does mean it needs to be bookended or couched in action adventure terms.
Right.
This is
This is
not
why kids
just a
turn on.
Batman
This
thing.
is why kids turn on the TV.
This
right?
is a superhero thing, honestly. But I mean, you need to keep this in mind for Batman because a lot of people want to really like sort of climb in their own headspace with Batman a little bit and forget the fact that he also punches murder clowns or whatever.
He does
right?
punch murder
anyway.
clowns. I think that's a great observation because it is a perfect way to open this episode again. And I don't know if it's one of those. I wonder if I showed this to someone who had no context, if it would work. Because I feel like for me, I just have known about this episode for so long.
Right.
It's like I just automatically know. I'm like, oh well, it's a great trick, but I already know the
you know
magic.
the reveal.
Yeah, I know the reveal,
Yeah.
so it's not as effective. But I do wonder if I just showed this to someone who'd never seen it, if it would be like, what? Like,
Skip the title. Don't tell them the title.
Yeah,
and just
right.
put them in and see what happens. I'd be interested.
Yeah.
We have a lot of listeners who have not been watching it for most of their lives, like you and I have. So, listeners, holler at us. Let us know. I mean, you saw the title, so you had
You
that.
can't
going
get out.
in.
Yeah, you can't get around
But
that.
how big a surprise? How revealing was the reveal? I'd be curious to know as well.
So let's talk a little bit about the reality that Bruce Wayne dreams up, which is, firstly, of course, he's not Batman. His
Right.
parents are still alive. He is recently engaged to Selena Kyle, which, hey, man, as we already talked about in our Cat 1 episode, they've got some great A
He
chemistry.
is legitimately interested in her. Yeah.
He runs the company, but he doesn't run the company because his father has retired. He's technically technically the CEO, but Lucius Fox still does all the work.
Still runs it, right?
But he's not Batman. So it's like, what is he doing? He's being a billionaire playboy, right?
Right. The act has become the reality. And I mean, that's why I call into question the idea that this is his actual happiest life.
I don't think he actually wants this.
No.
But I think this is
the
him
machine is doing a thing.
right.
And this is the closest that it can be without him being Batman. We don't get this interiority, but I feel like Mad Hatter's programming of the machine kind of cocked it. Right? He figured that Batman's happiest life would be not being Batman.
Right.
Missing the fact that this is a pretty good life, really.
Right.
I don't think Bruce would ever, given the option, would trade his parents for this, but this is a good life.
I mean, his actual Batman life or the dream life?
Yes, his life as Batman. He has recreated a family for himself. He is dynamic and important to the city and eventually to the world at large. He saves more lives by day and by night. I mean, this is a good life.
I don't know if I quite agree with that, but I see where you're going. Like, he has created the best version of this life he can, right?
Yeah, which is pretty sweet.
Sure, but I mean, he's still haunted by the death of his parents. He's still.
We are going to discuss that in terms of this episode and a coming episode where I don't think he's as haunted as a lot of pop culture wants him to be. It's colored by the time that the comics were coming out,
Sure.
when people were playing that up a lot.
Right.
But I think you see that here. It doesn't filter into his perfect life, his allegedly perfect life, as much as someone who was actually tortured. He gets his parents back. But
I have a hard time buying. Part of what makes Batman interesting is that he's generally not happy, even when he is happy. You know what I mean? Like I
don't agree with that.
I think he has created the best version of his life that he can. From that point of view, I'd say that's happy. But at the same time, I mean, he still has to fight killer clowns that keep getting away, that kill lots of other people.
Sure,
all that
but
weighs
he's
on him.
capable of it.
It weighs on him, though, right?
Oh, well, I mean, look, it's not always fun.
There are people he can't save still.
Sure.
And let's also not forget, I know within the context of this episode, but the Two-Face, he's still haunted by his parents. Like, he had a dream with Harvey Dent where he feels like, to an extent, there's a correlation between how he failed his parents and how he failed Harvey Dent. Like, so
we will talk more about his survivor's guilt and how good a handle he has on it in our next episode, where we deal with Dick Grayson's survivor's guilt.
Well, and also don't forget the Mask of the Phantasm either. So just something that I think.
But that is a much younger Bruce Wayne.
Sure, I'll give you that point.
I mean, I think that makes a big difference. I think post-Robin, we're talking about a guy who has found balance in his life.
I guess my point is, and this is where you and I might just disagree and have to agree to disagree, at least for today. I might change my mind tomorrow, but I don't always like doom and gloom Batman. I know you especially like Batman that's generally a little happier, not always in the gutter. I don't like the 1980s grunge Batman.
Serious. I like serious Batman.
Right. I'm attracted to the idea that the man is forever tortured, and that kind of sucks and it's kind of miserable. But I think even his own tortured reality and soul, I think he can find happiness in certain ways. But I also feel like he's never really satisfied.
Oh,
that's something.
Satisfied and happy are not the same thing. And of course he's not satisfied.
I feel like
you're right. There are people he can't save.
Exactly. But
I think Superman is unsatisfied in the same way, and he is never portrayed as this. That's not true. He has been portrayed as a tortured person, and it doesn't work.
It misses Superman. The point of Superman. Yeah.
I think this is a place where the ongoing nature of Batman's narrative across multiple media makes this very difficult to pin down.
Sure.
A lot of times, writers and sometimes readers also, because you keep getting these stories, are more attracted to this kind of tortured Batman. I don't necessarily know.
Just because he's tortured
works as his entire art.
Sure.
In as much as an ongoing, never ceasing publication character can have an arc.
Well, exactly. And there's a couple things that I want to throw at you. One, people gave Christopher Nolan's version of Batman where Bruce Wayne does get out and finds personal happiness and who he is a lot of shit because Batman doesn't quit, right? So that's one thing.
I don't think he finds personal happiness outside of being Batman.
Okay, and I think that's I like the idea that version of Batman can, like the version where he can, exists, but also I tend to fall in the wheelhouse of you. But I just don't ever see him fully being quite happy. I mean, we see again in Batman Beyond, and this is future conversations, and I know you have your own issues with their take on Batman and Batman Beyond, but also he's a guy who can't quit, and I think the reason he can't quit is not because I think he's unhappy and dissatisfied. Like the only reason he quits is because he's actually physically unable to keep fighting, and
he almost breaks his one rule. Actually,
yes,
that's the thing that
he
makes
gets desperate,
him
right?
Quit,
yeah.
And if I can't do this right, I shouldn't be doing this.
Exactly, and he's still unhappy that he quit, and eventually that's how we get Terry McGinnis. I don't know. Happiness is a strong. I don't like the word happy because I just don't feel like that fits Batman. And I know what you mean though. There is a difference between satisfaction and happiness. I think he can find fulfillment. He finds fulfillment in a lot of ways. I should say that. I think that's, for me, it's a good word because obviously, yes, he gets the Bat family. He gets the cool, sexy tech. He's got a butler who's like his father. He has all the things.
He does the right thing, big picture all the time.
Right.
I mean, it's a fulfilling life.
Sure.
And I mean,
sure. Fulfilling, there we go. That's probably
I think if I'm going to get deep on a Batman show, I would say to you, dear people, look for a fulfilling life, not a happy one. Like happiness, it goes away, right?
Right.
And I mean, I feel like this is built into this episode. You'll note Batman still exists. It's just not him. But also note, Catwoman doesn't.
Right.
Selena does, Catwoman doesn't.
Right. Yeah, to steer back into the actual episode.
But I mean, that is part of the why I feel some of this is textual to this episode, right? Like, in order for his world to be perfect, a Batman has to exist, even if it's not him.
Well, and here's something else like this. Yes. So here's something else too. Whenever your soul has been, as a human outside the context of Batman, maybe there was a version of reality where this could have been his happiest life.
Yeah.
But he's already lived through experience. He had a soul-shattering, soul-crushing experience as a child that redefined who he was and what his needs were. So even though that maybe a version of Bruce Wayne could have been happy in this, because that happened to him, this is no longer his happiest self.
Yes.
And it feels hollow.
That is the thing that I'm getting at. And honestly, I mean, in comparison to his life as Batman, I think we could more or less objectively say it's pretty hollow.
Oh, no.
What does he do?
Yeah. He's that's what I'm saying. Like he's just being a billionaire playboy. Is that really?
I mean, to be honest, if I were going to see a believable best life that didn't involve Batman, he would have followed in his father's footsteps and been a doctor.
A doctor. Yep, I agree.
Or something where he is more hands-on saving lives and
again,
being
serving
a
the
use
community.
to people.
Yeah.
It just seemed very telling to me that Batman still has to exist, but Catwoman doesn't, but Selena does.
There's not a reality, even his air quotes, happiest reality where there's not Batman.
Yeah, because Batman is necessary to his happiness. And if there's a break, and yes, we will absolutely dig into this more with Batman Beyond, but if there's a break between this Bruce and the Bruce in Batman Beyond, it's the fact that he loses his family along the way, which I do not agree with as a creative decision.
Sure.
It serves the story of Batman Beyond while knocking the knees out from under the story of Batman. Because I think he does get to quit if somebody's able to take over. And he had, in the process, lost all the people who would take over.
Yeah, that's going to be a conversation for another day because I find the idea that Batman was basically successful in creating a Bat family, but then something terrible happened, some terrible family drama happens that separates them is fascinating. Could just speak to the fact that I think family drama is interesting and it's more relatable to me.
But we will talk about family drama that I find very compelling and very interesting that doesn't knock the knees out from under the concept of these characters in our next episode.
Okay, all right. Well, there you go.
I mean, because I agree with you. Like, there should be crazy stuff going on in here.
So let's steer it back into the episode.
Yeah.
He figures
Here's
out.
the thing. I'm going to say to you, I don't think we've steered out of the episode. I think these are the questions.
This is all relevant. I know. I absolutely because whenever you get into the psyche of Batman, you have all these questions get raised. Yeah, absolutely need to be asked.
I will ask you: have you read any of the most recent comic book run that Tom King has been writing?
No.
Okay, I'm going to make this a rec to you based on things you said in this episode, and anybody who's kind of vibing with Caleb, because I think this is as close to sort of sailing between our waters here. Tom King's run recently has really been dealing with Bruce as a depressed person.
Hey, I like that a lot.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Right.
I think that makes a lot more sense than a vengeful person or an angry person. You know, a lot of people will subsume or attempt to subsume their depression in activity, right?
Right.
And it'd be really easy to convince yourself that you were doing the right thing for yourself to just not deal with your depression by putting on your Batman outfit.
I'm so into that because I'm not going to lie, as a person who has suffered from depression throughout my entire life, you know, the thing that like makes me not feel depressed is finding something to do.
Right.
when you're a billionaire who has the power to go fight crime, that's a great way to that's interesting.
So I would recommend it because it talks about that. It talks about how Bruce's vow, like his childhood vow, was made instead of committing suicide.
Yeah.
Right? Like he has the razor. The first cut has happened. And instead, at the last possible moment, he thinks he is looking at a picture of his parents, and I'm giving stuff away, but it's very germane to this. He wants to join them, and instead swears the vow.
Yeah, I need to read this.
It's not, I don't love every single bit of it, but it is the...
That's a really interesting take, though.
Yes,
that's
that is the way
I
that I would sail it. Because you're right, not happy, and actually the fact that his life as Batman is so fulfilling is what lets him just go do that instead of dealing with...
Right, having to deal with the internal
his
turmoil.
emotional stuff, right?
Yeah.
Who's going to tell you you're not doing the right thing when you've literally saved who knows how many lives every night?
Right.
Including yourself. It's fascinating. And I think the seeds of that kind of thought, this isn't good enough. This life of indolence isn't good enough. But we don't feel like Batman makes him happy either. What does this mean?
Right.
Tom King is probably sailing the middle space there.
No, I'm into that. I'd love to read that. So eventually, Bruce Wayne figures out, man, if I'm going to figure out what's going on, it's got to be Batman who's the problem. Also, tip of the hat you mentioned off air, but the way he figures out for 100% sure that it's a dream is he can't read.
Yes.
Which is actual, real, true neuroscience.
Yes. In the show notes, there will be a link to an article on Inverse that literally starts with, so in the episode Perchance to Dream, and then goes on to talk about how you can't read in your dreams and probably can't speak.
It's fascinating.
It is. Talk to us on Twitter. It's absolutely
Please.
amazing, but it'll be in the show notes, and I found it very intriguing.
Well, I mean, it just shows that they did their homework when researching,
right?
how do dreams work? Well, it wasn't just a gimmick from a storytelling perspective. They figured out how to work the science into the actual narrative.
Let me ask you if you noticed a thing. So the book is interesting. The newspaper is interesting. But nothing is as surreal to me. Like, it really punched me when he was getting into the Gotham Park, and the big gothic Gotham Park sign is unreadable.
Yes.
So surreal.
It's unnerving. It's unnerving. Yeah.
The books and things were like, aha, a moment. But that was just like...
You're like you're like in nightmare territory. You're like, what is this? Oh, I don't want to go into that park. It's scary.
Right. It's because now it's an unknown commodity. Despite later he says, this is part of my nightly patrol. But now it's unknown because it's not labeled. It's... I could draw that back around to Batman Bruce Wayne also if I wanted to. But draw your own conclusions, friends. So Caleb and I have mined that hard today.
Very hard. So much to talk about. So great. Such a great topic this episode. So basically he goes and confronts Batman, who we find out, of course, is the Mad Hatter. But not the real Mad Hatter, just the version of Mad Hatter that's running the dream.
The dream version of Mad Hatter?
Because he confirms, no, actually the real Mad Hatter doesn't know any of this. Know any of your identity or any of that. This is just my version. I'm the one planted in your brain.
Which is pretty cool, actually, and fills in that he probably knew he was after the Mad Hatter's men at the beginning, even if we didn't.
Oh yeah, exactly. No, right? That was
he's got some details we're not privy to.
Exactly. Yeah, because that was who he was chasing at the beginning of the episode, I'm sure, and he knew that, we didn't. So that's why when he confronts him at the end, that's probably how he was able to draw that conclusion. Honestly,
right.
And he's trying to think back. What was I doing before the you know what I mean, and then it just all the wheels start turning and and now he's like, that can't be Batman, that's gotta be the Mad Hatter.
That's the problem.
Right.
I'll also as far as your ideal self, I think it's really interesting that the otherwise very indolent Bruce Wayne is pretty spry in his dream. Once he decides to do something,
right,
he finds himself infinitely capable of doing the thing.
Right.
Pretty great. What's your real ideal self?
Right.
Is the one who can make things happen, right? The one who is active, who is capable, who is Batman.
Such a fun little twist. And then of course he wakes up and he beats up the Mad Hatter, police show up, story over. And something I never really considered before, by the way, just as we've talked about all these episodes, it always ends with a Batman line. You know, a lot, not every episode, but a lot of the episodes.
Especially when he's talking to Gordon.
Yes, exactly. Anytime he's talking, he gets the last word. In this one, I wonder what that machine was. It's the thing dreams are made of. Close.
Yes. Hey, film guy, how did you feel about the Maltese Falcon lift for this episode? Yeah, it's okay.
It was okay.
I feel like it works.
It works, but I feel like it was a little shameless, honestly.
It works because we have the Maltese Falcon floating around in our minds. It doesn't really work on its own merits.
No.
That was kind of how I felt.
Yeah, that's kind of how I felt too. It was a little cheap, but I mean, it was fun. It's like, yeah, that's not super clever, but yeah.
You're even more correct than Sam Spade was. Right? Well done. You are more technically correct.
Oh my gosh. But Joshua, yeah, I'd say this is absolutely essential watch of the show.
Yeah, it's so much fun. For an episode that is relatively light on action, It's very fun and will give you things to think about.
Right. And again, I think, of course, we always love the Batman action. But again, I think the thing that's kind of kept us coming back to these characters, and this version especially, is how it does get into the psyche of how this guy works. It builds such a strong characterization of Batman. And there are multiple episodes, this being one of the best ones, that really drill down into what makes this guy tick. And it's, again, as we pointed out, that the air quotes ideal Bruce Wayne life is hollow to him. It's hollow to us, and we know it's kind of hollow to him too. Even though he has his parents and he's engaged, like, it just doesn't seem real and doesn't feel authentic. And even if, again, there is a version that's the best version of Bruce Wayne's life, it's not his. This is not our Bruce Wayne.
This fake Bruce Wayne that he made to hide the fact that he has a fulfilling life.
Right.
Quite a group of things to unpack there. I mean, again, I don't think he's a moral monster who would trade his parents to be Batman. No. But I don't think getting your parents back is this magical panacea that just fixes everything else.
No, because that's the thing. It goes back to his parents died in front of him as a child. That is soul splitting and redefines
you're a different person.
What his needs are, everything about him. So, like, if you just like give him the thing he lost back, it's not going to fix everything.
Yeah.
Right? It's not like magically it's not just a band-aid you can put on and it's fixed. It's like, no, this goes so much deeper than just surface level. You lost your parents. It's like, what did losing your parents in front of you do to you? And you just become a totally different person. And that's why, it's like if you ever like in a terrible relationship in your teen years that redefines how you look at relationships and stuff. You can't just get, if that person came back into your life, it's not like it's not going to fix it. It's probably not what you want anymore.
In terms of Bruce Wayne, I would say the hole left in his heart created by the loss of his parents had to be filled with something even bigger than his parents.
Right.
Enter Batman.
Right.
This huge concept that does all these amazing things, including, I'll just say fix, because there's a lot of ongoing fixing. But, Batman is the way that Bruce Wayne fixes himself in an ongoing manner.
It's how, fixes is a strong word. It's how he lives. How he lives
it out.
Yeah, it's how he lives.
But again, I would say we want to be Batman to a certain extent.
Right.
It's a good life.
Right.
It's a fulfilling. It's
fulfilling and important.
It's important.
Right.
But not just in big world saving ways, but also in small personal ways.
Right.
He saves individuals.
He is making the world a better place.
Yeah.
So obviously we recommend this episode. So Josh, before we wrap up, what are some alternative recommendations you have, like some non-Batman animated series recommendations you throw out there?
I am going inside baseball for these and have two superhero recommendations. One is very big scale in a way. You can find this in JLA Volume 2, the series by Grant Morrison and Howard Porter. It's called American Dreams. And within this story, it's a whole Justice League story, but Batman's in there. You have a villain called the Key who realizes that the Justice League always wins. So he rigs a whole elaborate trap so that them winning will actually give him the energy that he needs to unlock the secrets of the universe.
That's clever.
It's very clever. And it's actually an ongoing theme of Morrison's run. The JLA always wins. What happens when that gets soured?
Some of the bad guy figures out how to harness their winning.
So the way that he entraps the Justice League is to put them all in their sort of ideal versions of their lives. And so you get these fascinating looks into all of these main players. You find out that Superman is still on Krypton as Kal-El, but going to this whole, you're somebody different, so we have to make a different dream for you, he becomes a Green Lantern. He's a Green Lantern of that sector.
Right.
So he's still that hero, right? Batman is old, married to Catwoman, has a child, who is Robin, who's out on his first night as Robin.
Wow.
With Tim Drake as Batman. Of course, it's Batman, so the whole thing goes to hell in a handbasket, but that's also part of him figuring out that this is not the thing that we all thought it was.
Right.
You get Wonder Woman, who is basically living a version of the Wonder Woman TV show. So she's still a hero, but the stakes are lower. She doesn't feel like the weight of being Wonder Woman so much. It's fascinating and excellent, and all that stuff is actually not even the point of the story. So that's one of my recs.
Nice.
The other one I don't want to talk too much about because we will get to it eventually, but there is an old Superman story by Alan Moore called For the Man Who Has Everything. And we'll talk more about it because it's adapted into an episode of Justice League.
Yep. It's a great episode too.
It's so good. I'm
When
going
you
to be
talk
careful
about-
because I'm going to get all
Yep.
choked up talking about it. Like I have dad moments watching it, and that's all I'm going to say about it
Yep.
for now.
That's a great recommendation, especially because Superman, man, again, I'll go back all the time. I like Superman as a character a lot more than a lot of people do, and he gets a bad rap for being so bland. But I'm like, no, go
got a
read
lot
that
going
book,
on. Yeah.
watch that episode, and you get a really good feel for like what is it he wants? Like what is it he really wants?
Watch what his ideal life looks
Mm-hmm.
like, right? His ideal life as a farmer on Krypton, I actually buy.
I do too.
That guy
It's way
doesn't-
simpler, right?
Yeah.
and doesn't have the weight of the universe.
I buy the also becomes Green Lantern idea. Like that's another tactic
sure.
to get to the same place.
Sure.
But if there's a person who is out there doing superhero things who would also be happy just doing the thing that he did as a kid, like
Right.
like I grew up to be a farmer. Yeah. Also, again, that like
Gets to be a
combining-
farmer on his home planet.
on his home planet,
Yeah.
right? And another way you see that, like, this is another reason that I know these writers think about that Selena exists, but Catwoman doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
The version of the woman he marries on Krypton looks like Lana Lang and sounds like Lois.
Yep.
These guys think about that stuff, just saying. So that episode of Justice League, or there are several DC stories by Alan Moore collections that are out there that have
Back
the man
before
who has
Alan Moore got
everything.
really depressing and upset all the
weird,
time.
just weird.
Yeah. Again, I like some of the weird, dark,
Me
upsetting
too.
stuff, but
and DC deserves his hate. He has a special personal reason to hate them.
Oh, yeah.
But
Yeah.
boy, did he get really weird. But before that, he wrote some really interesting, introspective, in this case, Superman stories. And this is the stuff we expect from Batman stories by and large.
Right.
But it's excellent.
Right.
So, yeah. So Superman winds up through the machinations of the story with in a dream ideal world. And it's really interesting to see what that looks like. And I think it's a great companion piece to this episode.
Yeah, great. Yeah, no, absolutely. Great recommendation, Joshua. I'm going to go a little more away from the comics, although I will start with the one little Superman nod as well. And we've already talked about Smallville once, but I just got to throw this out there because I think it's one of the strongest episodes of Smallville, which is season 5, episode 9, Lexmas, which is like their Christmas special.
Yes.
It's great because it's like, I think it's in season 5. This is right after we've had 4 seasons of Lex wrestling with who he is and trying to be a good guy, where he's actually faced with the decisions about whether to be a good guy or a bad guy. And for him, he has this basically the idea is his mother's ghost haunts him in his dreams and like shows him his happiest life. And he's not a billionaire. He's just a pretty lower middle class guy. He's married to Lana Lang. They have kids. It's great. It's beautiful and like it's his happiest self. But then there's a twist at the end where it all goes sour. And he realizes, oh my God, without my money and my power, I couldn't have, basically, more or less, he loses Lana and to cancer or something, a disease, and he can't save her. And then he wakes up. He took away all the. He wakes up and he takes all of the wrong lessons away from the dream.
Well,
because
that makes sense.
Because he basically is like, if I only had more power, and because he basically in the dream he goes to his dad.
Yeah.
Because the whole idea is he's trying to break identity. Lionel Luthor, and in the dream he goes to him. He's like, well, whenever you left our family behind, you left our entire legacy, our billions, you left it all. So it's really interesting because it works as an individual episode, kind of understanding why Lex would, outside of the Kent reasons, why he would choose to take that route. And it also shows that at his core, what he wants is actually a very pure, happy thing that all of us want, right? But he just takes away the wrong lessons, and it sets him on a path that really makes him the villain of the piece.
Yeah.
And it's really brilliant. It's a great episode.
No, I think this is one of those places where Smallville understands Lex
better than
Superman.
Yeah, I agree.
Because compare that with the man who has everything. Superman, Clark Kent, is a man who could lay all this power aside. If he had a guilt-free way to lay all this power aside,
right,
he could be ordinary and be utterly fulfilled.
Right.
Lex Luthor will never be fulfilled in a world where he is not the most important, most powerful person.
Yes, exactly.
He is in his core incapable of laying power aside.
Right.
And there's your moment.
Right. And again, without getting too far into the weeds there, it works as a standalone episode, but it also sets, he's basically a regular on that show for 2 more seasons, and it sets up his entire arc for the last 2 seasons.
He's finally a villain instead of Pa Kent.
Right.
Ha! I'm running away.
And we'll leave that conversation there. So that is your DC Comics recommendation. I also have to give a shout out to some Dream movies that I think you should all see. The one you've probably seen that I'm going to recommend is, of course, Christopher Nolan's Inception, Really great way talking
yeah.
about dream manipulation and the powers you can adopt in dreams when you believe in it. It's really great. Tom Hardy pulling out that grenade launch when he says, we mustn't be afraid to dream a little bigger, darling. He pulls out the grenade launch. Stuff like that's really fun.
Yeah. Yes. Very much similar to this episode where there's all this deeper stuff going on, but they don't shy away from the fact that BT Dubs also an action movie.
Yes. Oh, yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a great balance of like action, spy, espionage. Yeah, it's great, but also having like some really great core themes and characters, and also 2 lesser known films that you should see. So in the same breath of Inception, you should also watch a movie that was very influential on that, an anime film called Paprika. It's a lot weirder than Inception, but Inception undeniably, like, I don't want to say steals quite, but kind of steals a lot of the ideas and functions of that movie in a live action format. Paprika is a film, believe probably the last film from the director Satoshi Kon, who all of his films are top notch. And then, of course, Terry Gilliam's Brazil. Watch whatever the ultimate cut is, because that's another movie that's got a very troubled production. There's like 8 cuts of it, but the final Terry Gilliam's definitive version is like a really, really, really dark version of this story.
Oh, yeah.
Have you seen that one?
I have.
Okay.
Oh, well, I have seen Brazil. I have not had the pleasure of the ultimate.
Okay, because there's like a fake happy ending that ruins everything.
Yes,
like if you,
yes.
we'll have to talk about it off here.
I had to see it because it kept coming up every time I talked about Blade Runner.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's similar, troubled production history, happy ending tacked on, doesn't really work.
Yep, exact same problems, yeah.
Well, that about wraps it up for this animated discussion. Caleb, where can people go to continue the conversation with you?
Well, I'm the editor-in-chief over at thecinematropolis.com. It's a website dedicated to really deep dive analysis of films, kind of like in the same way we're breaking down each episode of B-Tast. We do this with all sorts of movies. So if you like the sort of thing we're doing here, I hope you'll head on over to thecinematropolis.com. And of course, where you can read essays from myself, a lot of contributors, including Joshua Unruh here, who has written some great superhero pieces. And also, we've gotten Smoking the Bandit, some old films too, some great A essays there. You can also find me on Twitter tweeting about movies and TV and video games and all sorts of other pop culture on Twitter at C Masters Talk. Again, that's letter C Masters Talk. Joshua, how about you?
I'm also most active on Twitter, where you can find me easily enough as at Joshua Unruh. I'm happy to field any superhero questions you might have, and who knows, it might even become a podcast unto itself. I'll also keep you in the loop on any fiction, articles, podcasts, or diatribes that I cast out into the world, including my work at the Cinematropolis and for Pulp Diction Productions and Press.
Our next episode, or should I say episodes, it'll be a 2-parter. I am having to reconcile my feelings when we talk about Season 2, Episodes 4 and 5, Robin's Reckoning.
We'll see you next time. Same bad time, same bad channel.
Animated Discussion is a Pulp Diction Productions program and is 100% supported by listeners like you. To find out how you can keep this and our other shows in production, check out patreon.com/pulpdictionproductions. And if you can't support us financially, please leave us a rating and review on iTunes. It's the best way to help others discover the show. Keep up with Pulp Diction news by following at Joshua Unruh on Twitter, or find us at facebook.com/pulpdictionproductions. And a special thanks to Vinnie Hogan for our original theme music.